because they're bigger than me. Because if I write my stories and like put that into the world, which would be great, it would be for me. It would be like for my ego. But building Arcadia, it's for the rest of the world.
Prochaine station.
Lowkey MTL.
So like when I think about Arcadia and the business, I call back so much history from different industries, from society, from other stuff. Like I obsessed over, I was already obsessed with like the history of gaming and the history of like the personal computer and technology in general, down to like wanting to understand how, like where it all comes from, like studying Alan Turing and like how like literally how the World War set us on a path to have to like solve these like encrypted like messages to the point where we had to create a machine that was so advanced that it was like the foundation of like all computers. So history, it's like history repeats itself, and you can learn so much from history, and if you figure out those patterns, you can start seeing it in your life, and like that can help you. And then math, it's like if you can't apply that specific theory to like your life or anything else, just the practice of problem solving and like learning algorithms and like learning systems and stuff like that, just that practice alone improves your cognitive ability to like problem solve things in life. You may not see it correlating like directly, but you're just practicing a muscle. It's like,
I feel like anybody who spent like an hour trying to solve a math equation understands that.
Yeah.
Like, cause like you go from like not knowing what the fuck is going on to like, oh, okay. And then once you understand, you're like, this is so easy.
Yeah.
It's like the fear of like you're just unaware of what's gonna happen. So you're just like afraid of it, I guess.
Like your mind is a muscle, you know? So if you're training it in different ways, you may not realize what those gains will help you with in other areas of your life. Chess is like a perfect example of that. Chess is a game, people compare it to, like, people think of it as like a game for smart people or like whatever.
The Queen's Gambit changed that.
Queen's Gambit is a sick show. But like the more when I really got into chess when I was like older, like playing chess.com in the app, you start developing this skill where, you know, you're thinking multiple moves ahead, and eventually when you practice enough, you start flowing with that thought. Like you play a lot and you start thinking multiple moves ahead for yourself, for the opponent. You start developing like rules of like every time I move a piece forward, I'm always going to protect it, and I've always got an agenda. You start developing an automated thing. Like when I used to play chess initially, it's like I'm doing the theory and I'm doing that stuff, but eventually you develop the skill of like, I want to win. So my first equation to solve is, what is the quickest path to me winning? And I'm only focused on, you know, getting a checkmate. And every time I make a move, it's towards like making that happen while defending myself from getting taken advantage of. And every time the opponent makes a move, it affects my ability to win or increases my ability to win. And you're geared towards that way. You make that a habit, your brain thinking that way. It starts applying to your life and to your career, because there are parts of your life that you might be comfortable with, and now you're thinking 5 conversations ahead or 5 sentences ahead before the other person says something. So when I'm negotiating with a client or like a potential partner or whatever, I've got it in my head. My goal is to win this conversation. Right. My goal is to close this deal.
Are you considering like ethics in these situations? If that makes sense?
Yeah, always.
When you're trying to win a conversation, right? What's like, I guess like what's the like higher purpose behind that? If that makes sense. Is that too like meta?
No.
Okay. Like, is there like, because you have the goal of winning a conversation, but there's probably like a higher goal of like trying to like make an impact and like change something, right?
Yeah. Well, there's so much to say there. Like, well, the frame of winning a conversation isn't accurate because, to be specific, it's in the context of
playing chess.
Well, like in the context of like when you're running a startup and you need to close a deal to get to the next point, or you're trying to close a partnership, or you're trying to hire a new person to come in or whatever. There's a goal to that conversation. So there is a winner. The ultimate goal in a partnership or in hiring someone is for both people to win.
Win-win, right?
Yeah, right. But it's not every conversation you have to win in. But when you're bringing up ethics and higher purpose, I mean, that's like a deeper thing, right? Like, because getting to that conversation where if you haven't taken the time to self-reflect on like what you want out of your life and like what your purpose is, or like what you're trying to do, then you're probably picking the wrong conversations. And then if you're trying to win conversations or like close deals without having a clear understanding of like what is your ultimate goal and like what is your faith, or like what is whatever, then you're probably working out of ego. Then you're probably just trying to like win to win. There is no bigger purpose to what you're doing. But at the same time, the idea of having a purpose is something that I don't know if I believe in anymore. Did you watch the movie Soul from Pixar?
Yeah.
So that's partially why. When I saw that movie, it connected with me so much. Do you know who wrote that movie? It was some of the writers and creators of like other Pixar films that were super successful. I don't remember if they did The Incredibles or whichever other movie they did, but they made that movie. They dedicated their whole lives to like perfecting their craft of like storytelling and animation, and like became amazing. And then they reached the height of their goal. Like they were self-actualized. They made this movie, and it's like, now what? And you look at what you gave up, and it's just like living like in this thing that we don't understand. And I have to say, like, when you're running a company like ours with a crazy mission, and trying to revolutionize entire industry and like market two industries, the sports and gaming industries, there are times where it gets super challenging. And I hit that point where I was like, what's going on? And then I watched that movie, and what attracted me to it was a movie about jazz, and Trent Reznor did the score. And it's like I'd been grinding, working so hard.
The score, or even better.
Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross were the guys who wrote the music for the film.
Okay.
Yeah. And I love music, but like that year, I watched that movie during winter break. And that year I was grinding really hard. It was like the year that COVID happened, and I was like, the first thing I did when I turned my computer off to cut for winter break was I put that movie on. And I cried so much because I was just like,
my favorite, like,
it's amazing. Yeah, I love it.
It's so good.
Yeah. But basically, because I felt what the movie was trying to say. Like, this guy dedicated himself to jazz, and this is my purpose, blah blah. And I love that scene when the gods are like, "Oh, you humans are so basic with your purposes. You're this, It's just like life is also about living, And but then, what does it mean to live well? And how do you ensure that like everyone has a chance to like live well and like be happy? And that's kind of how I've started getting back into the groove with like Arcadia and stuff, like balancing the higher purpose of what this company is about with valuing like how do you make the day-to-day feel better and like flow better. We're not totally there yet. So I think it's like it seems like it's a challenge at every company right now post COVID, but that's definitely like how I'm operating now.
How did you, like, you were already into like the VR space prior to this though, right? Like how did you get into VR in the beginning? Because you have like an art background, you went to design school, right?
Yeah, you wanted me to bring that up. So whatever.
I'm like the chillest guy, right?
Tell me how you learned all this shit.
Obviously, nobody could mimic like the path you've taken to get to where you are.
Yeah, they can.
They can, but like
they just need to somehow convince their parents to get divorced when they're 2. If they can figure that out, they're good. That's step 1. That's actually step 1, by the way.
Because like the chip on the shoulder type thing, or
I think one of the copywriters I hired while I was at Sonder, this girl Bailey Siebold, who's like fantastic, just really smart, like intelligent, like woman. This one time we're having drinks at her place with her husband, and we just really got along, and like we're talking about storytelling, and I asked her this question, like, why is it that like so many popular stories, the lead protagonist is always an orphan? You know, James Bond is an orphan. A lot of Disney characters are orphans. Jesus is kind of an orphan, you know, like kind of.
But that kind of like
sorry,
starts a story.
Harry Potter is an orphan. Like all these people are orphans, and she goes, "Oh, that's a writer's device." Like to her, it was like for me, it was like such a question, like why do so many stories like this? She's like, no, writers have to do that. I'm like, why? I'm like, so that the character can think for themselves. That hit me so hard because like my parents split when I was 2. My mom was sick. My father, you know, moved to Ottawa, and I ended up living at my grandmother's house, my Portuguese grandmother's house. I was really fortunate because my mom was 23 when I was born, and she had younger siblings. So my godmother, Natalie, my aunt Elizabeth, and my godfather, George, all lived there. And they were like between the ages of like, I think like 15 and 19. So I'm in this house and I literally have like fairy godmothers. And I'm learning from these amazing, like loving mentors. They're not my parents, right? So like, I guess you get into this survival instinct where you're like, I need to take care of myself.
Oh, even with that, you felt like you had to take care of yourself? Okay,
you have to think for myself. I need to, I don't know for sure. I don't remember all my memories when I was 2, but that does make sense to me. I find it interesting because I feel like that's one of the reasons why I definitely believe in like a higher power and like faith and like the universe and everything. Because I look at my childhood and I look at some of the things and I'm like, it's so crazy how a lot of these things that seemed to be hurting me ended up preparing me for the life that I have now. And like when I look at that first thing, it's like that's why I was so comfortable having mentors. So I was so used to having like these voices that would like teach me like more stuff. So as I got older, that was one thing. 2, packing my bag to go to my father's house every second weekend and like unpacking it or whatever. It's like that's why I'm so comfortable just like packing a carry-on and traveling the world and like coming back home and like doing what I need to do. And like
you don't necessarily have like a place that feels like home. Is that what you're trying to say?
No, that's now we're gonna get personal, but no, I haven't felt at home. I don't think ever.
Did you ever have like times where you just kind of like were a backpacker? And,
yeah.
Like, and did you have ideas and like revelations from traveling? Because that's very common.
I've been fortunate to travel in a way that I got access to see things that you would never get to see. That was kind of crazy. Like I got to hang out at my first time going to the Louvre was like in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. with no one there. How many people get to say that? Yeah. It was closed off for the set of 50 Shades Freed for the final shot. And it was just like nuts.
Tell me about the VR virtual reality camel that Abu Dhabi wanted you to make. Was it Abu Dhabi?
Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia.
Let me grind through the timeline so you get that, and then we can have that context.
That
way you have like a framework. Yeah. So
that's a good idea.
Okay, so parents get split when I'm 2. I start, doing a bunch of stuff. Trying a bunch of things. I always had hobbies. I took them kind of seriously, like drawing and even like magic. I took magic super seriously and like animation, and like I built
Magic is cool. It's like psychology, right?
Sorry?
Magic is cool. It's like psychology.
Yeah. I feel like magic. So this is my point, where it's like you think it's just card tricks, right? You're just learning this trick, and some people might have a negative context, like, oh, you're learning how to trick people, or like whatever, right? But magic, like learning how to do that, teaches you confidence. Teaches you like persuasion as well, teaches you showmanship, like skills. Because like I would take a basic trick and then add a whole story to it and learn how to like, make you look here when really I'm doing this other like trick over there, or like whatever. And
It's an art form.
That definitely made me a better at pitching.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like because you build that initial confidence. And back to this is gonna be hard for you to edit this to connect some of the parts of this conversation, but like back to like what was it that made me realize that you can learn, like that there's learning and there's no loss to learning anything, was kind of like the serious pursuit of some of these hobbies, finding patterns between them. So when I was like learning how to draw, like the book teaching me how to draw cartoons was like, you need to draw 1,000 pages before you're good enough. Then learning how to do magic, it's like, you need to do this magic trick 1,000 times before you're good enough. And it's essentially just like practice enough that it becomes a habit, like practice enough that it falls into your subconscious. And then you start, when you learn a lot of different disciplines and see a lot of different things, you start finding patterns, and that's where innovation is born. Because like so many people, they stay in their silo. They're like, I'm going to learn how to be an accountant. I'm going to learn how to be an architect. I'm going to learn how to be an artist. And some artists make the mistake of like, I don't want to look at anything in the world because I don't want it to influence my divine, thing or whatever.
Yeah, creativity is a collective consciousness.
Exactly. Creativity is absolutely a collective consciousness, and we could get into AI after, but like the best innovations, the best like things come from connecting dots that most people can't see. That's how Arcadia was born too. I had built relationships with so many people in different industries, and like had developed my passions across so many cross-functional disciplines that I started connecting dots that like other people couldn't see, because somebody became like a professional at producing games, and someone else became a professional at making movies or creating tech, and they don't speak the same language. And
they feel like they're not relatable. Which is such a bad way of thinking, I find too.
Yes,
I agree with you
100%. And then so that it puts you in this special position where it's like, but guys, actually, because you can in an instant see the connections between things. So
what was the first VR project you worked on?
Well, the way it happened was I was working at Sonder. Sonder is like a better Airbnb. So when you book a hotel at like a Hilton, you know that you're going to get a quality standard of like service and amenities, right? You know you're going to go to the Hilton and the mattress is going to be a quality.
Don't
towels.
Open the water.
Sorry?
Don't open the water so you get charged for it.
Yeah, exactly. But the style of the Hilton, no matter where you are in the world, is probably the same. Like if you close the windows, you won't feel like you're in Italy or you're in like France or whatever. Like you feel like you're in a Hilton. Now, if you book an Airbnb, you're going to feel like you're a local. You're going to live like a local, right?
You're like a pretend backpacker.
I wouldn't pretend, but whatever. Okay, well, I guess pretend. Yeah, you're not a real nomad.
You're not staying at hostels.
Yeah. Okay, so.
Or like that's what the backpackers would say.
Yeah. Okay. They're more hardcore than I am, I guess. And then you stay at an Airbnb. It's cooler, like it's more of a local place. You should feel more at home, but you don't have a guarantee of quality of amenities and services. You're not sure that the towel that was used to clean the door handle wasn't the same towel they used to clean the toilet. You don't know if there's
hidden cameras.
You don't know if the mattress is clean. You don't know if there was a dog there before and you're allergic to dogs. I don't freaking know. You know what I mean? But that can happen. So Sonder is the missing link between these two things, because they effectively like got access to properties in local like communities and then added the level of quality of service and amenities to them. So every time you book a Sonder, you have a nice place that feels like you're in Montreal or you're in London or you're in San Francisco or whatever, but you're guaranteed that you're gonna have like a quality mattress, quality like towels and like soaps and all this stuff. So you get like the best of both.
I would argue that there are like middleman services for Airbnb, like management services that do that, right?
Yeah, but Sonder was at the beginning of that. Sonder started before any of that was a thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so I joined that startup when I was. Do you want the path? There's so much I can say. I joined that startup like after freelancing. because the path is interesting. I want to say it's super quick.
Yeah,
so,
well, that's what I want. Like, I'm always curious about like how these things like happen, like those moments.
I go to high school. I go to high school like everyone else. While I'm in high school, my stepfather teaches me like so much about music, buys me like a guitar and stuff like that. But at the same time, I'm just like drawing all the time. And drawing was the one thing that all my parents, like my parents and my step-parents, agreed, like, this kid can draw. Like, they really supported that. So they would, like, they paid for me to do like a course. Actually, I never finished it because I kept buying books at like the bookstore to like learn how to draw and stuff. But my stepfather bought me Photoshop, and my stepfather bought me Photoshop when I was like 12. And
you just like figured it out, or was he?
Well, this is what's really cool, and this is what's really unique. Is so my stepfather's friend made a ton of money, became a multimillionaire, creating a affiliate marketing website for casinos, because you weren't allowed to have a casino website in Canada or in Quebec.
Yeah.
But he created a website that was like, whenever you would Google like best casinos, like best online casinos or whatever, like his website was one of the first. So learning about like SEO, like I was learning about that when I was like 12. And
what year is that?
2002, 2001.
That's like pre-YouTube. Holy shit.
Yeah. Okay. Like I'm talking like, it's like 2001. Like I've got, like my day is filled with like drinking Sunny D, eating Pop-Tarts, playing PlayStation 1, like playing Need for Speed and Spyro. And then, yeah, and like watching my stepfather build a web business and learning with him as he's learning how to do it. And it literally gets to the point where part of the reason why he got me Photoshop was for me to design like banner ads for him using ICQ, MSN. It's like before MSN Messenger.
Okay. Like MySpace.
Asking people about MySpace didn't exist yet.
What about High Five? Wasn't it like a High Five?
I used MySpace. That was the first like social one.
But that's so crazy. So you're like, you have like this is such a rare thing to have, like, to be able to see at that age. And so like for you, it's probably so like natural, like, oh, like, yeah, like this is like an obvious process to this.
Or like even like learning the history of like the rivalry between Steve Jobs and Bill Gates was like, we used to watch documentaries together. So like his friend Ralph and like my stepfather, like Silvio would show me documentaries of like Joe Satriani and like these sick like musicians, and we'd like watch like this stuff like hours and like really get me into like the passion of like music. And then Ralph was really into technology and stuff, so they would watch that, and I love that stuff. So like pre-YouTube or anything, like I'm watching these like sick documentaries on this like industry that like I find really cool.
Yeah.
And
meanwhile, I'm watching like Bollywood films.
Like, yeah, it's
where
cool.
a guy just like flies and like flips, like gravity doesn't exist.
You're like, that's how the world works.
He smokes like a puff of weed and then like decides to kill himself.
Oh, that's fun. Is that a real thing? Oh my god, propaganda.
There's a movie scene where like this guy like takes like one hit of like weed, and then he like looks in the mirror and he's like starts like ripping his hair out, and then he like jumps off like a high-rise building.
Yeah.
My parents are just like, see, this is why you shouldn't do it. And like that literally just made me want to try this shit more, because I'm like,
really?
I see people doing it, they're not dying.
Yeah.
Like, and then I'm like, oh,
why am I not dying?
Yeah, I'm just gonna like try everything.
Yeah. I remember the first time learning about spam, like I remember like that was revolutionary.
Spam emails?
That was revolutionary. Because they were making money off of like clicks, right? So like if you go
How
on
many people open the email, right?
Well, before spam existed, my stepfather had this website called Web Casino Bonuses. I don't know if it still exists. And you'd go on the website, and then it would have all these like links, like top 10, online casinos. Click this link to get like $100 credits. All these like banner ads like everywhere. And every time someone opens the website, he makes money from the ads, right? Every time someone clicks on a link and goes to the website, if that person creates an account and then spends money, he makes like a percentage cut of like what they're doing. Yeah. And like it was like a good business, like up and down, right? So seeing that was like that was what was going on like at home for me when I was like between the ages of like 11 and like 13, let's say. And while that's happening, it's like I'm going to school. When we moved to Saint Eustache, I was the only English student in a school with over 1,200 kids, and it was tough. Like, no joke, like one time this kid tried acting smart with me on the bus, and whatever, I had a smart mouth back then, and he got like offended because he was trying to bully me on the bus. I was like an easy target. English, young, skinny. A lot of it is like weird to talk about because the racism here revolves around language, not as much the color of your skin, you know?
Yeah.
And there is just like, they just hated me because I was English.
Yeah.
It's that simple. I had no friends for like 3 months. I literally went through that thing where like I would eat my lunch in the fucking bathroom because I didn't want to fucking deal with it. And it didn't really affect my mood totally because I had a lot of friends like outside of school, and I had like the right friends like within school.
And you had family and like socials.
And I had family and like stuff like that. So I wasn't like, obviously it affects you to a degree, but I wasn't like, oh, I was picked last in gym. Like I wasn't that kid. But I will say like, one of the things that happened to me that's like completely nuts is, so this guy tries embarrassing me on the bus. I can't remember what I said, but like I got the wherever we were sitting in the bus, like people were laughing at him with like a burn that I said.
Right.
It bothered him, and then he had an older brother who was on the football team, and I so nuts. The entire football team lined up in front of the school and just started yelling my name. Just started yelling, Christopher Olimpo, Teu, Christopher Olimpo. It was like nuts. I'm shitting my pants. Now I'm afraid, right? It's older kids. I'm in, grade 7. They're in grade 9. And I'm like, fuck. And like, luckily,
2 years is like huge back then.
It's huge. And they're football,
football
players, and but luckily I made friends with the right kid. There's this really short kid who's super confident. No one would fuck with this kid. Just like a super confident short kid. And his older brother was in Sec 3, grade 9.
Oh, you got 1 year on them.
So he brought me to meet his older brother, and his older brother's like one of the smokers. So like you'd have the smokers who would smoke in front of the school.
The bleachers.
And then he tells his brother like, hey, this is Chris, like blah blah, this is what's going on right now, blah blah. And then the brother's like, yeah, fuck that, and like throws his cigarette away, talks to a few of his friends, and then all the like smoker crew, cool like kids, like lined up in front of the football players, like, t'appelles qui, tabarnak, like, I have no problems with, j'ai aucun problème avec toi, là. Moi, je cherche le gars qui a niaisé mon petit frère, là, blah, blah. And I'm hearing this from a distance, and then I see the fucker that pissed me off on the bus, like walking around, like looking for me, And they just broke out into a fight, and it just became this massive fight in front of the school, and I just dipped and walked home. It took me like 2 hours or plus to walk home on the side of the highway like a loser. I was like, that could have been me, and I would have had the shit kicked out of me. And I walked home. That definitely shook me a bit. I didn't go to school for like a week because I was like nervous. And I remember I was listening to like Blink-182 and like and drawing in Photoshop and doing animations like claymation. Till my mom was like, "Yo, you're not sick. What's going on?" And then I went to school. I'm like, "This is the sitch." And and then it's the classic like, like when you become best friends with like the guy that tried. And you're like, "You're cool. Yeah, we're cool." Like one of those situations. But the only thing that saved me in that school, because I was there for 2 years, was actually theater. I was doing like...
that helped you in that situation? What?
Yeah, you think like, that's fucking funny. That helped you? I think people would rip you more. Yeah, a theater kid? How did that help you? The class I picked was art class. I used to draw so many cars. But I realized I drew cars.
Whole, like, book of cars.
But I think I drew cars more to get approval from my father than for myself. And I drew cartoons and wrote stories for myself. And that's what... And funny enough, the first character that I drew and everyone knew about. And if you ask Karina, like, what's Chris's cartoon character? She's gonna say Squarehead. This is a cartoon character I developed when I was in high school at this school.
Was it in the Dawson stuff?
Dawson Doesn't Like Derek, but I ran the comic section at Dawson.
No, but wait, was there a Squarehead in Dawson comics?
I may have included him like one time, but I didn't do it consistently.
I remember like looking through
those comics. Oh no, yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
yeah,
there she may have found one. Yeah.
Okay.
My goal was to become a cartoonist that like came up with like a story that I would pitch to Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon, and I like the Cartoon Network more than Nickelodeon, and that was my goal. It's like one day I'm going to pitch and I'm going to show run my own cartoon television series.
And was this cartoon television series already like fully like you already had a world and like characters?
I have 2 seasons written.
Okay, so it was already very like specific. It wasn't like, oh, whatever chance I get, like I'll do. It was more
No. In fact, that was one of the fondest memories I have of my father. It's like when he picked me up every second Friday to go to his house, he'd ask me like, okay, what's this week's episode? And then the drive was about 30 minutes and I would tell him the whole episode. And I'd have like my binder and I would be like,
would
that's what this happens.
Give you like his opinion or like
yeah, always.
Something? Okay.
But like fun, but like it was fun though.
Like it was like a brainstorming.
Yeah. And the character his name was Squarehead, and it's like coming of age, like typical, like listen, I wrote this in like 2003 or 2002 or whatever, and he's this character that like mysteriously gains the ability to shapeshift into like anything he looks at, doesn't understand where he got this power, and he's just trying to deal with like, it's like typical. This sounds like cheesy, but like, listen, I was like 12 when I wrote this.
This is not cheesy.
But so he mysteriously gains the ability to shapeshift as he like, you know, is dealing with like puberty and going to high school and like all this stuff.
That's like Spider-Man.
It's a bit like Spider-Man. But every time he shapeshifts, whether he becomes an octopus or a plant or a girl or a book or whatever, the one thing he can't change is the shape of his head. You always see like the square shape of his head.
Okay.
And throughout season one is all about him learning how to hone his powers with his friend, like his friend Frank and him are like misfits in the school.
Yeah.
Obviously my close friend was Frank, and it'd be like these scenes where it's like Squarehead is like in the library studying for class, and he's like, and they're reading about animal like biology or whatever, and he's like, oh no, it's happening again, and like his arm is like turning into like an octopus thing, and Frank
so he
doesn't have control over it, and he's like, what the hell, and like Frank's like, oh shit, and he's like trying to help, and like Frank passes like, and he's like, it's like, come on, like help me out, like I'm turning into like this octopus right now. And then like Frank pulls him away into the like where the bookshelves are in the library, like away from the students. I don't know if people know what libraries are anymore, because everything's on the internet. No, I'm kidding.
No, but like you have.
And then Frank's like pulling books, trying to like find something else, and he passes Squarehead like a human anatomy book, and then he like turns into a girl. He has like, you know, and I was young and it's crude, but he has like breasts, and they're like, you know, they're 13 or whatever, and they're like looking at each other like, okay, this is better. like they can like calm down, and it flips a page to a picture of himself and then turns into himself again. Throughout season 1, what you find out is that, so the first act is like coming of age, first year of high school, trying to build confidence, like speak to the girl that you like, trying to deal with like the bully. The bully that I wrote, I thought was so genius for the time, and now I guess it exists, but at the time, bullies were always written very one-dimensionally. They're like stupid jocks that like put down like young nerds. But the bully that I wrote, the villain that I wrote, was not just a good-looking athletic jock, was also like a valedictorian, super smart kid. So it was like a double threat of like, you think you're smarter than me? Like, nah. Like, it was just like a really brutal, like alpha like guy. That now that I think of it, is an Arcadia athlete. Because it's like literally like both. But what you end up finding out in season 1 is that the way Squarehead, so Squarehead ends up figuring out how to gain his power, like how to tame his powers to a degree and how to control it. And you find out that the way he acquired his powers was this like scientist that was doing like R&D on creating super vegetables and had his research like canceled. Basically, like his research was canceled and he couldn't get test subjects to do his stuff. And he noticed that Squarehead eats carrots at lunch every day. So he started replacing Squarehead's like lunch box with his gene spliced carrots, and to try and prove that like this will make like a student like more like intelligent or more this or whatever. But the gene spliced carrots end up having like a bit of a mutation that that changes like Squarehead's DNA, and give his eyes the ability to see like the DNA of other things and then match them. So like these like basically gene spliced, carrots CRISPR. Gives CRISPR. It's kind of like CRISPR, and it is actually kind of like CRISPR, and it's this idea that, but it's put in the food.
Change the DNA?
It's the idea that it's kind of like a very loose like connection here, but it's the idea that carrots help with your eyesight.
No, that I get.
Yeah.
How is he able to like look
so the idea is like if he looks at something, it doesn't make as much sense with looking at a picture or a book, but the idea is like if he looks at something, the superpower will look at the molecular code or like the DNA like of that other thing, and it will start changing his DNA to match that thing. Kind of like a chameleon, but like on another level, like more than just like color. And that's like season 1. But
this is fucking amazing.
Thank you. and like
this is like a Marvel. This is like a Spider-Man.
Yeah, and at the core,
and something as simple as like a scientist. Imagine like your science teacher secretly like at home he's doing like personal projects, like doing shit like this, and then he just notices. I'm thinking of like Back to the Future, like type of dude. Yeah. And then he's just like switching out your carrots during lunch. Yeah. It has like a modern like retro-y like.
Yeah. And I wrote that when I was 12, and the truth is my actual passion is writing, but I'm doing all these things because they're bigger than me. Mm-hmm. Because if I write my stories and like put that into the world, which would be great, it would be for me. It would be like for my ego. Mm-hmm. But building Arcadia, it's for the rest of the world. But to get back to it, the reason why Squarehead's head is square. Squarehead was the derogatory nickname that I was like bullied with in high school. Okay. Tête carrée. Tête carrée means like English kid. T'es une tête carrée.
Really?
Yes. And the idea behind the character was basically like, no matter what I did, because like in high school, your identity matters, right? So people would come up to me and the first thing they would ask is, t'es fresh ou t'es skate? Which is basically, are you a skater like kid, or are you into like hip hop and like break dancing and shit like that? Those were your two options. Okay. And I had a very confused identity, because like high school is where you try figuring that shit out. So I would wear like Vans shoes and like I had a Rough Riders chain. I was like lost kid.
You're in between. Yeah.
I didn't know, and eventually I just decided like, fuck it, like I'm just me, and I just wore generic like clothing. And I guess I was a little bit more preppy, but I didn't know that was a thing,
Right.
And but it was like no matter what clique or style or thing I was associated with, I was always in tête carrée. So that was sort of, I guess that's how I ended up coming up with this character that was like, can shapeshift into anything, like literally anything, but he can never change that part of himself.
Now, is he the only person that sees his head staying square, or is that what
everyone else sees it?
Okay, so now he has to shapeshift into things.
The way that
squares in them?
No, it was kind of like one of the fun design elements of the character is that like no matter it was.
This is like looking at like comically wise, like were you looking at comic?
Yeah, like comics or like a cartoon. It's kind of like. It was actually like a good design choice because it made the character iconic. So no matter what the character would shapeshift into, you always knew it was that character. Yeah. So from an art direction point of view, it made sense. And I can't, like at 12, like how are you thinking about this stuff? But I guess I was. And
you had that story to like that point when you were 12?
Yeah, man. Like, but everything I'm telling you right now,
That hasn't changed over time.
that has not changed.
That's insane.
Yeah, that has not changed. That's
cool.
season 1. Season 2 is when you start, shit gets wild.
I don't want you to talk about season
I won't.
2
I won't.
because I want this. I literally want to see a cartoon version of this. Like,
Yeah.
I would watch this shit.
Yeah.
I would literally watch this shit.
Actually, when my sister was showing some of those drawings,
Yeah.
Squarehead was in there. Some of those drawings that she had.
I gotta go.
Yeah. And
that's really cool.
yeah, it's old, random. I think that's how I became a creative director. Like the idea was just I wanted to be the guy that came up with the ideas. But there's all these stories, man. There's all these stories that I've written that will eventually fold into Arcadia or whatever. Or if I fail at everything, then I'll do that.
Do you feel like Arcadia is like an accumulation of like every single thing you've done till this point?
Yeah.
It is?
Arcadia is the culmination of every single thing I've ever been interested in, worked on, and goes a step beyond the thing I never truly mastered, which is my body. Which is like, because I was so passionate about creativity, art, design, and technology and innovation that I just grinded my mind at the expense of like taking care of my health. And it pisses me off.
But I feel like everybody has to go through that phase of like...
They shouldn't have to.
Like, not to quote Jordan Peterson, because like, people have like...
I like Jordan Peterson.
Okay.
I whatever. But like
the whole idea of like becoming like a savage and becoming a beast and then learning how to control it. I feel like, not to be sexist, but like as a man, like, I feel like it's very important. To,
I don't think that's sexist.
Well,
to identify as a man.
No. Like it's like more of a male's perspective. I feel. Like,
I get it. Okay,
like a nurturing woman is gonna be like, I want to be a savage.
I get it now. You're sexist. Okay,
yeah.
You made your point.
Exactly. That's basically what I was trying to say.
No, I don't think that's sexist though. But
But yeah, I feel like when he framed it that way of like becoming like a savage and becoming to the point where like you push your limits in the sense of like being so like crazy that like you almost go crazy is important because you understand like the limits of your like psychological capacity and then you could like control yourself accordingly. Yeah. You know?
I've definitely been through that a few times.
Yeah, I feel like I'm like in that process right now, kind of.
Me too.
I guess you're always in that process then?
No. Every time you think you figured shit out, the universe has a way of being like, yo, by the way, no. And then you're like, ah.
Now you gotta beat this level.
I mean, I think it's, for me, like in business, in your career, like there's different challenges, but I find in relationships, it's like one of the ones where you can see it. It's like when you're young, you're just like, whatever, you just wanna, when you're young, like love is love, you know what I mean? And you love everyone. And like, well, I'm gonna get older, I'm gonna get married. I used to bring girls like flowers in elementary school, like nonsense. Work-life balance today like doesn't exist because of the way like we're growing as a society. But I was trying to stick to the point of every time you think you've got it figured out, the universe has a way to remind you like you don't. So I feel like step one in relationships is I just want to find someone. When you're young, it's like I just want to find someone who's as sexually attracted to me as I am to them, try and lose your virginity and like do whatever. Then you're like, I want to be loved, like I want to love someone and I hope they love me back. And like you try and date and then they don't.
Like, there is like a point where you're doing things to expecting things in return. Which is when you learn like
a mistake.
Yeah, you that's like I feel like that was like an important lesson for me is like doing things with expectations. Yeah. Which like fucks everybody up. Yeah. And then once you have no expectations, you just start winning. And then like you said, the universe like punches you again. Yeah.
And then it's like for me it was like then you meet someone that you love and loves you back equally as much. And then you're like, great, I found someone that loves me as much as I love them. Right. And this is amazing. And it's like, oh, by the way, love's not enough. You got to be like compatible in like all these other like things. Yeah. And you're just like, you don't want to accept that. In my career, it's like, it's similar as well. Like my thing was, I managed to pull things off that a lot of people like dream of. But I did it at the expense of my health, physical and mental. And then as you get older, it's just like, okay, like, no, like there's like a breaking point. And I wish, growing up for me was like, I identified as an artist, you know, like I'd watch all these videos of my stepfather about like musicians and all these people. It's like they're night owls. I'm an artist. At night, it's quiet. That's when my creativity happens, you know. I drink coffee, I stay up, I do. That's part of the culture and part of the values, you know. Routine, like I would hear people say like, routine, that's like too structured. Like structure is not for artists. Artists like chaos, like all this shit. It's bullshit. Had anyone told me, hey, if you go to the gym and you eat right, you'll be a better artist, I would have done it. And the truth is, that is the truth. Because like the healthier you are, the healthier your body is, the healthier your mind is. The healthier your mind is, the more functional, the more creative like you can be. The healthier your thoughts are. And
the better you feel.
The better you
feel, you are as a person.
The more consistent, like you could run marathons instead of like running sprints and then burning out. Like so many freelancers and so many creatives, they're in that culture, and it's something that's like, and I was a freelancer and I was this type of person, you know, like I quit my full-time job at Lockheed, which was like comfortable. I started working as a busboy at a club at Pink Taco and B-Side and Up Club. I was working there, paying my rent, and then freelancing on the side. And as I was freelancing there, that was actually where I got my exposure to a lot of founders and a lot of entrepreneurs. And it's like when you're a freelance graphic designer,
so
eventually
you specifically did graphic design freelancing?
I considered myself an art director, because basically I would do like I would direct photographers, videographers. I would design websites and like do illustration and typography.
So you would, like, hire freelancers for your projects?
I would eventually, yeah. When I started, I did most of the stuff myself, but I eventually started hiring freelancers. I even like directed like a commercial for like Reitmans and stuff. When I worked as a busboy at the club, I eventually converted that job into like me rebranding Up Club.
I feel like we should close this off.
Sure.
Because my battery's supposed to die too.
Yeah, that's fine. I can talk a lot.
Yeah, no.
We didn't even talk about Arcadia.
I know.
It's awesome.
But just to like, I guess, stitch it all together.
We didn't talk about anything interesting. We didn't talk about anything trendy. We didn't talk about AI.
No, that's the point of this.
We didn't talk about AI. We didn't talk about Arcadia. We didn't talk about.
Okay, well, part 2 is gonna be about all the clickbait trendy stuff.
Maybe, who knows?
But like,
we spoke about it enough that people will think, oh, they're gonna talk about AI now, and then it never happens.
No, but they don't need to know that. We'll cut that out.
Yeah. It's always nice to meet people that take their shit like seriously and that want to learn. So I'm always gonna be happy to share. If you could get any value out of anything I'm saying,
100%.
which isn't, I hope, great.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, dude. Thank you.